5 minutes before the shareholder meeting started. My ex-wife Evelyn Hartwell sent me a message. Damien. Don't make a scene. Walk out with dignity today. And I'll leave you a shred of face. I looked at the words. Didn't get angry. Didn't fire back. I just dialed my broker. All shares of Novacore Technologies under my name. Sell every single one. Right now. 2 seconds of silence on the line. Mr. Sinclair. All of them. All of them. And across the venue. Evelyn had already changed into her most expensive power suit. Ready to take the chairman's seat. Beside her, Julian Ashford was popping open a bottle of champagne. Like they were celebrating a coronation ahead of schedule. They all thought I'd be the one losing everything today. They didn't know I wasn't handing over a company. I was handing over a ticking bomb. The green room was dead quiet. Quiet except for my phone buzzing. Still Evelyn's message on the screen. Sign quietly. Don't humiliate yourself at the meeting. She used to talk softer. Before the divorce. Anyway. Back then. She always left a little room. Not anymore. She'd locked down the CEO seat. Won over most of the board. And had Julian clearing the path beside her. Of course she had the right to talk like that. I set the phone down and checked the time. 5 minutes until the meeting started. I called my dedicated broker. He picked up fast. Mr. Sinclair. All my Novacore shares. Liquidate the entire position. A clear pause on the other end. All of them. All of them. Mr. Sinclair. Market sentiment is strong before today's meeting. And the order book can absorb it. You could cash out a significant amount right now. But are you sure you want to leave nothing? I looked at my reflection in the window glass. The man in the mirror wore a neat suit and a calm expression. Like I was talking about something ordinary. I'm sure. He lowered his voice. If we sell everything. At current pricing. The final settlement should be around 86 billion. Fine. It'll get noticed by the market. Let them notice. He didn't argue further. He'd worked with me long enough to know I don't repeat myself when I've made a decision. Understood. Executing now. I hung up. Leaned back. And closed my eyes. Truth was. I'd been waiting for this day. Not to get thrown out of the meeting. Not to lose. But for the last layer of illusion to finally tear apart. 3 months ago. I'd discovered an anomaly in Novacore's flagship energy module. Not a minor glitch. A thermal runaway boundary issue. Under combined high load and extreme environment operation. The module would enter irreversible failure. I'd run 3 rounds of internal validation on that conclusion. I'd proposed pausing production expansion at the tech review. But Evelyn said the market window only opened once. Julian said all new technology had to iterate in real-world applications. The board was even more direct. They only wanted to hear about growth. Not risk. Eventually I realized, when a company gets pushed high on capital hype. The least popular thing in the room is the truth. My phone lit up again. Another message from Evelyn. If you sign the authorization papers now, I'll let you keep your founder title. I almost smiled at that. She really knew what outsiders cared about most. Titles. Dignity. Leeway. Too bad I stopped caring about any of that a long time ago. I typed back 2 words, sounds good. Read receipt appeared within 10 seconds. Then nothing. She probably thought I'd caved. I picked up the folder on the desk and stood. As soon as I opened the door, My assistant Leo Marsh was waiting. He lowered his voice. "Mr. Sinclair. Are you really doing this? Has the trade started?" "It's started." "Then we're committed." His expression was complicated. "At the venue. They put your seat in the very last row. No nameplate either." "Doesn't matter. Also, your speaking slot was cancelled." I grunted. All expected. Today's shareholder meeting was never about discussion. It was just a procedural walkthrough to push me out. Leo followed me. Hesitated. Then spoke. "Mr. Sinclair. Do you want to fight one last time? If you release the technical report publicly, the room might not be unanimous." I stopped and turned to him. "Release it." "Then what?" Leo faltered. "Let everyone know the problem." "Know it." "Will they stop?" He didn't answer. So I answered for him. "No. They'll say the risk hasn't been finalized. No need to panic. And when it finally blows, they'll say nobody could have seen it coming." I kept walking. Leo followed in silence. At the end of the hallway was the main hall. Even before I pushed the doors open, I could hear the applause inside. That kind of excitement had nothing to do with me. The lights inside were bright. When I walked in, almost no one looked at me. Most eyes were on the stage. Evelyn stood there in a dark tailored suit. Hair perfect. Expression steady and sharp. She'd clearly prepared for this day a long time. Julian sat to her right, scanning the agenda. When he noticed me enter, he glanced up. A quick look. But it carried obvious contempt. Like a winner glancing at a late arrival. An usher led me to a corner seat in the last row. No nameplate. Sure enough. No materials on the table either. Just a bottle of water. When I sat down, someone in the row ahead turned to glance at me. Then quickly turned back. Like they were afraid to be associated with me. The trading interface on my phone updated in real time. Sell orders hammering out one after another. The price held up decently. Novacor was at peak capital euphoria. Everyone thought it would keep flying. I watched the numbers and felt nothing. Some things climb higher, only to fall harder. The moderator took the stage and announced the meeting was about to begin. Evelyn slowly settled into the main seat. She glanced in my direction. A very flat look. Like she was confirming something. Confirming whether I'd accepted my fate. I looked back at her. Didn't nod. Didn't react. She withdrew her gaze. Took a sip of water. And the shareholder meeting officially began. My phone vibrated lightly. A message from the broker, 35% executed. I locked the screen and looked up at the stage. The show was just starting. The moderator delivered a lengthy opening speech. Thanking shareholders. Reviewing past achievements. Outlining future strategy. I'd heard these lines too many times over the years. But today, everyone listened especially closely. Because everyone knew this was the transition meeting. Novacor's power structure would be rewritten today. Now, please welcome the company's president. Ms. Evelyn Hartwell. Applause rose as Evelyn stood. She adjusted the microphone slightly. Scanned the room. And then, very naturally, paused on me for a second. "First, I want to thank someone." She paused. "Thank Novacor's founder, Damien Sinclair." Many heads turned to follow her gaze. I sat in the corner. Like a deliberately placed backdrop. Evelyn's voice was steady. Without his persistence back then, there would be no Novacor today. I acknowledged that. Always. She smiled slightly. Another round of applause followed. To outsiders, it looked gracious. But I knew what she'd say next. Sure enough, her tone shifted. But a company at this stage relies on more than just technical vision. Markets change. Industries change. The rules of competition change. If we remain stuck in a single-minded technology-driven mindset, Novacor won't go far. The room went quiet. She chose her words carefully. But every one of them was aimed at me. Several critical expansion plans were delayed in recent years. Several overseas partnerships stalled. We lost valuable ground. I've always believed a company can't just keep its head down in the lab. It also has to look up at the market. Nods in the audience. Murmurs of agreement. Evelyn stood straight. A clear sharpness in her eyes. Today's transition isn't about denying the past. It's about bringing Novacor into a new era that truly belongs to it. The applause that followed was louder than before. I glanced at my phone. 58% executed. Not bad. Order flow was still absorbing. Julian took the microphone with his usual polished smile. He had a gift for wrapping harsh words in a package that sounded like concern. Damien and I have known each other for years. I've always respected his dedication to technology. But times don't stop because of one person's habits. He looked at me. His tone sincere. Almost consoling. Modern corporate governance requires broader vision and faster decision-making. If core management keeps rejecting market opportunities based on personal judgment, ultimately, it's the company that suffers. More applause. Someone in the crowd added bluntly, exactly. A company isn't a personal project. You can't be too idealistic. Capital windows don't wait. You can't make the whole company bear the opportunity cost of one person's caution. I listened to all of it without reaction. Julian continued, over the past 2 years, Evelyn's operational results speak for themselves. She drove the international expansion, optimized the equity structure, and laid the foundation for profit growth over the next 3 years. I fully support her appointment as chairman and CEO of the group. Another wave of applause. I watched the two people on stage and suddenly remembered years ago. Back when the company was just starting. Cash-strapped. Projects stuck. Evelyn sat next to me in an ordinary blouse, holding a stack of spreadsheets. She said, "Damien, we're going to make this company big." Back then, ambition was in her eyes too. But that ambition was about charging forward, not stepping on someone else. Whether she changed, or the company changed, it didn't matter anymore. The moderator read the proposals, deliberately softening my name. Regarding the board restructuring and management adjustment plan, submitted for shareholder vote. Item 1, appointment of Ms. Evelyn Hartwell as chairman and CEO. Item 2, restructuring board seats. Reducing the founding technical committee's decision-making authority. Item 3, adjusting the reporting line of the Technology Center to the board's Strategic Development Committee. Each item was precise. This wasn't just replacing a person. It was cutting out the last bit of influence I had left in the company. Leo sat behind me. Fists clenched. They're taking the tech center too. I didn't turn around. That's what this was always about. But you built that center. The company wasn't built by one person. My voice was calm. But Leo caught the undertone. He whispered, "Mr. Sinclair, Did you already decide not to stay? I stared at the numbers on my phone. Stay for who? A director in the front row suddenly turned around, raising his voice deliberately. Mr. Sinclair is very quiet today. Looks like he's come around. Another chimed in. Smart to know which way the wind blows. We can still be colleagues. I looked at them. Both wore polite smiles, like they were offering comfort. Really? They were just checking if I'd surrendered. I said flatly. Don't worry. I won't spoil your good fortune. They blinked. Probably didn't expect that response. Before they could retort, the moderator announced the voting process. Shareholders began casting ballots. My phone buzzed again. 73% executed. Almost done. I flipped the phone face down on the table and looked up at Evelyn. She was listening to the moderator report the approval rate, barely containing her smile. She thought she was taking over the company today. She didn't know she was catching a falling knife. While the votes were being tallied, I thought back to the worst argument Evelyn and I ever had. The company had just broken into the core market. Our energy module landed the industry's first batch of major orders. Investors knocking. Partners lining up. Media chasing daily. Everyone said Novacor was about to take off. Evelyn was buried in work. Meeting investors all day. Negotiating deals. She brought her laptop home too. One night at 2 a.m. I came back from the lab and found her in the living room. The table was covered in M&A proposals and financing term sheets. I asked, "When did you last sleep?" She didn't look up. "After this month." I closed her laptop. "Rest first." She looked up. Brow tight. "Damien. This isn't the time to rest. The window is narrow. If we don't scale while the iron's hot, someone else will push us out." I sat across from her. The technology foundation isn't solid yet. Solid doesn't come from waiting in a lab. Her voice sped up. The market won't wait for perfect preparation. Everyone else is running. Why should we stop? Because I see a risk. She looked at me then. Impatience creeping in. You always see risks. Name one time your risks actually sank the company. Damien. You can't make everyone crawl just because you're cautious. That was the first time we fought about the company's direction until deep in the night. Later, those arguments multiplied. She wanted to expand. I wanted to stabilize. She thought the company's biggest enemy was hesitation. I thought technology's biggest enemy was wishful thinking. Then Julian came in. He started as an external compliance consultant. Smooth talker. Thorough worker. The directors loved him because he could package complex problems into clean, easy solutions. Evelyn grew to trust him too. After one board meeting, she said to me in the car, "Julian's right. Corporate governance can't rely on founder instinct. It needs systems, mechanisms, capital coordination." I asked her one question, "So you think I'm making decisions on instinct?" She was quiet for a moment. "At least you trust your own judgment too much." I didn't say anything more that day. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I suddenly realized we weren't on the same road anymore. Our marriage started cracking around then too. Not betrayal. Not scandal. Just two people who used to walk side by side slowly stopped understanding each other. She started finding me cold. Difficult. Obsessed with data and testing and boundaries. I started finding her too impatient. Too trusting of capital. Too enamored with pretty growth curves. Until 2 years ago. When the flagship energy module entered overseas mass production planning. I found the anomaly in the 4th round of extreme condition testing. Under sustained high temperature and load. The module showed thermal runaway amplification. Not obvious under normal conditions. Parameters could stay within limits. But under extreme scenarios, it could fail. I took the data to the technical committee. Requested a production halt until 3 more rounds of extreme verification were completed. That meeting lasted 3 hours. I projected every data point on screen. Explained each one. At the end, Evelyn leaned back and said one thing: has this conclusion been confirmed by an external lab? Not yet. Then it's an internal warning. Not a final conclusion. I looked at her. Internal warnings aren't worth acting on. Julian jumped in. Worth noting. But we need to weigh priorities. If it's just boundary sample anomalies, it shouldn't overturn the entire project timeline. I turned cold. You're not an engineer. He smiled. But I look at systemic risk. The board ultimately decided not to halt production. Only asked the tech team to continue monitoring. In theory. Monitoring. In practice. Pushing forward. I raised 2 more postponement proposals after that. One was tabled for the next meeting. The other never even made the formal agenda. Eventually I knew it was useless. Not because they couldn't understand, but because they didn't want to. Back in the present. The moderator finally announced the vote result. On the first proposal. Approval rate, 88.6%. Applause erupted. Someone even stood up laughing. Congratulations, Evelyn. Well deserved. Novacor is in great hands. Evelyn rose. Wearing a measured smile. She nodded to the people around her. Then looked toward me. That look was complicated. Triumph mixed with relief. I didn't look away. Held her gaze for a second. Then dropped my eyes to my phone. Broker's latest update, 89% executed. Just the tail end left. Leo whispered behind me. Mr. Sinclair. I still have backups of all your risk reports. Want me to release them now? I shook my head. But they're wrong. They still don't think they are. I watched the celebration on stage. My voice flat. People have to pay for what they believe. I used to cover their tab. Not anymore. The second and third proposals passed in sequence. Each one was like tearing down another wall in the company I'd built. The tech center's authority weakened. The founding technical committee rendered powerless. Even the approval nodes I used to sign off on were reassigned to the strategic committee. On paper, Novacor still existed. But the era that belonged to me was over. Julian picked up the microphone for closing remarks. Today's transition isn't anyone's failure. It's the company's evolution. As he said it, his gaze landed on me again. I almost laughed. Evolution. Some people always dress up their ambition as the tide of history. Too bad history never takes responsibility for the consequences. My phone lit up. All positions executed. Then a second message, estimated final settlement total, 86.2 billion. I stared at the string of digits. Tapped my finger lightly on the table. Finally. Over. At the exact same second. An encrypted email hit my private inbox. From my old contact overseas. Short message, final warning document scheduled for public release. Synchronous distribution in 5 minutes. I locked the screen and slowly raised my head. Evelyn was accepting congratulations from the whole room. Standing in the brightest light. Her smile carrying the gleam of victory. She didn't know. She'd just taken possession of a company that was already counting down to detonation. The final part of the shareholder meeting was pure formality. The moderator walked through the motions one by one. Shareholder representative speeches. Management statements. Future strategy presentations. Everyone talked beautifully. Expansion. Integration. Internationalization. Synergistic growth. These words came out of their mouths like layers of gold plating. Nobody mentioned risk. Nobody mentioned boundaries. As if saying it smoothly enough meant the problem didn't exist. Evelyn's closing remarks were noticeably more relaxed than before. Thank the board and all shareholders for your trust. I know today is an important milestone for Novacor. Starting today, we will accelerate our global strategic push forward overseas M&A execution, and further unlock the commercial value of our technology. She paused. Then looked at me. The company will respect every historical contributor. And I hope everyone who once fought for Novacor can understand the choice of the times. More applause. I understood exactly who that was for. On the surface. Respect. In reality. A declaration. Simple meaning, you're already the past. I glanced at my account interface. The first tranche of funds had started arriving in batches. The numbers were cold. Clean. Certain. Leo's breathing was heavy behind me. Mr. Sinclair. They're saying that to your face on purpose. I heard it. And you're not even angry? I thought about it. I used to be. Not anymore. He probably didn't understand. It wasn't that my temper had improved. It was that I'd already stepped outside the arena. A person only feels the sting of humiliation when they still want to fight. Once you've decided to leave, a lot of things lose their power to hurt. Before the meeting officially adjourned, several directors had already crowded around Evelyn, congratulating her, talking about new projects ahead of schedule. One even said directly in my earshot, with Evelyn at the helm, the company can finally move freely. Novacor's valuation won't stop here. At the end of the day, a tech company comes down to capital structure and management capability. I sat still. Julian walked over and stood by my table. He looked down at me, still wearing that perfectly measured smile. Mr. Sinclair. You worked hard today. I looked up. You too. All for the company. He said smoothly. I looked at him and asked suddenly, do you really believe today was for the company? His smile froze for a fraction of a second. Then recovered. At least I believe Evelyn is more suited to lead Novacor than you are right now. Then I hope you get what you want. I stood to leave. But he added one more thing, Mr. Sinclair. Honestly. If you'd let go earlier, the scene wouldn't have been this ugly. I stopped. Turned back to him. Who told you the ugly part was mine? His eyes flickered. Before he could respond, I turned and walked out. Leo caught up, lowering his voice. Mr. Sinclair. What did you mean by that? Nothing. But it sounded like what? He opened his mouth, then closed it. I knew what he was thinking. But it wasn't time yet. As soon as I stepped out of the venue, my phone vibrated again. Same overseas contact. Release sequence confirmed. Irreversible. Followed by another line, do you really not regret this? I stood at the end of the corridor and stared at the words for a few seconds. Regret? Saying I had none would be a lie. Novacore was something I built with my own hands. From a few people in a lab to an industry giant. Every layer of the technology foundation. Every product iteration, I oversaw it personally. There were over a decade of my life in that company. And the best years Evelyn and I had together. But if regret could fix things, a lot of things wouldn't have come to this. I replied, no regrets. After sending the message, I opened the bank transfer page. Entered the recipient information. Evelyn Hartwell. Amount, $900 million. Leo saw it. Froze completely. Mr. Sinclair. What are you doing? Transferring. Why? My fingertip hovered over the confirm button. I said flatly, consider it my last act of decency. She just pushed you out of the company. Yes. And you're giving her $900 million? I pressed confirm. It's not to prop her up. It's to leave her a lifeline. When the transfer confirmation popped up, something went hollow in my chest. Not because I regretted the money, but because I knew. Once this money moved, a lot of things were truly over. Leo frowned beside me. She might not appreciate it. Whether she appreciates it is her business. Whether I do it is mine. I put my phone away and walked toward the elevator. The venue was still lively. Applause and laughter filtered through the doors. Like a grand victory celebration. I stepped into the elevator. The doors slid shut. In the last sliver of gap, I saw Evelyn surrounded by the crowd. She stood at the center. Like a new monarch who'd just received her crown. The doors sealed completely. The world went quiet. Leo looked at me. Still reluctant. Mr. Sinclair. Are you really just walking away? I leaned against the elevator wall. My voice level. Not walking away. Letting them hold it first. Hold what? I watched the descending floor numbers. Hold the consequences they chose. When the elevator reached the ground floor, the time on my phone ticked over by 1 minute. Less than 3 minutes until the overseas warning went public. I walked out of the building. Didn't look back. The wind outside was mild. The sky hadn't changed. But I knew that from this moment on, Novacore's sky was about to collapse. After the shareholder meeting ended, Evelyn didn't leave immediately. Several directors kept her talking for over 10 minutes. Some discussed MA timelines. Others brought up the next financing window. One even offered to increase personal investment on the spot. Julian stood beside her, fielding conversations smoothly. The two worked well together. One set direction. One closed deals. When the last group finally left, Evelyn visibly relaxed. She raised a hand to rub her temples. Julian handed her a glass of water with a smile. You finally got the seat. Why do you still look like this? She took the glass but didn't drink. It went too smoothly. Isn't that a good thing? I don't know. Damien was too quiet today. Julian chuckled. You won that big. And you're still worried about him? It's not worry. She paused. Her voice dropping. I know him. He's not the type to fold without a sound. Julian pushed open the VIP room door. That's the version of him you used to know. Now he's just someone the times left behind. The VIP room had champagne and glassware set up in advance. Curtains half drawn. Soft lighting. A bouquet of celebration flowers on the table. Clearly arranged beforehand. Evelyn looked at it for a few seconds. Then finally set down the glass. Who prepared all this? The chairman's office. Julian walked over and picked up the champagne opener. They're experts at picking the winning side early. Everyone knew you'd win today. Celebrating isn't strange. The cork popped with a bang. Champagne bubbled up along the rim. Julian poured 2 flutes. Handed her one. To you. The new chairman and CEO. Evelyn took the glass. Her lips finally curved upward. And to you. The chief compliance advisor who didn't waste his efforts. The glasses clinked softly. Julian leaned against the table. His tone light. Honestly. Seeing Damien sitting in the last row like that. It's kind of sad. Evelyn sipped the champagne. Sad about what? A man who built a company. Only to be eliminated by the rules he hated most. He wasn't eliminated by rules. Evelyn watched the bubbles in her glass. He was eliminated by himself. He's good at everything except being stubborn. I gave him chances. If he'd accepted the pace of capital. If he'd loosened his grip on management. We wouldn't be here. Julian smiled. You still have feelings for him. If I didn't, I wouldn't have bothered with that speech today. Evelyn paused for 2 seconds. But he really isn't suited for the company anymore. He only ever stares at technical boundaries. A company isn't a lab. It has to survive. Compete for markets. Capture share. He wants to eliminate every risk before moving forward. Reality doesn't work that way. Julian nodded. People who understand technology don't necessarily understand business. Or human nature. There was a clear note of triumph in his voice. Evelyn didn't argue. She even smiled faintly. Over the past few years, they'd fought too many times about expansion. Fundraising. Acquisitions. She'd grown tired of Damien's eternal calm. His perpetual veto. His insistence on drawing lines. Talking to him was like talking to a wall. No matter how beautiful a growth curve she presented. No matter how tempting a market opportunity. He'd always end with the same conclusion: the foundation isn't stable. We can't do it. Over time. Even the marriage felt suffocating. You know. Evelyn said suddenly. Sometimes I really think I felt lighter the day we divorced. Julian looked at her. Because he weighed you down too long. Not weighed down. She shook her head. Because he never acknowledged me. In his eyes. Only technical judgment was right. Everything else was compromise. Julian raised his glass. As if summing up for her. Then today proves you were right to win. At least from now on. Novacor isn't just one person's creation. They clinked glasses again. This time. She drank more freely. Next. We push the overseas acquisition. On the funding side. If we bundle in those previously stalled projects. The financials will look excellent. As soon as the market sees movement. The stock will pop again. Julian nodded. I've already had the team prepare the plan. After next week's board meeting. We can accelerate the pace. And the tech center. We need to adjust the personnel loyal to Damien as soon as possible. Can't let them keep blocking processes. Understood. They no longer sounded like they were celebrating. More like dividing up a freshly captured prize. Evelyn finally let herself relax completely. She set down her glass. The tension she'd carried for so long slowly dissolved. Then her phone vibrated. A bank notification. She glanced at it. Her expression froze instantly. Account credited, $900 million. She stared at the string of digits. Her fingers stopped moving on the screen. Several seconds passed. Julian noticed her expression change and stepped closer. "What's wrong?" Evelyn handed him the phone. "Look." Julian read it. First a blink. Then he actually laughed. "Well. That's something. Damien knows when he's beaten. Giving you compensation money. At least he didn't make the exit completely ugly." Evelyn didn't laugh. She stared at the SMS. And that nameless unease surged up sharply. "No. What's wrong? He wouldn't transfer this much money to me for no reason." Julian shrugged. Maybe the asset division wasn't fully settled. "No." Her voice quickened. "Our accounts were cleared long ago." Then maybe he wanted to leave a goodwill gesture. Damien isn't that kind of person. As soon as she said it, she stopped herself. She was right. Damien never made empty gestures. Especially not at a moment like this. Right after being stripped of power. Transferring such a large sum didn't look like surrender. Or compensation. It looked like a flash of the scene from the meeting. Damien in the corner of the last row. Looking down at his phone. His expression unnervingly calm. That wasn't the face of a defeated man. It was the face of someone who already knew how this ended. Evelyn's chest tightened. "Julian. Something's wrong." Julian was about to respond when his phone rang. The caller ID showed the overseas business director. He picked up casually. "Talk." Whatever was said on the other end made Julian's smile drain away. Bit by bit. The next second. The hand holding his phone visibly trembled. Evelyn stared at him. "What happened?" Julian's lips were pale. He seemed to want to speak but couldn't force the words out. Evelyn shot to her feet. "Julian. What happened?" He looked up. For the first time. Undisguised fear showed in his eyes. "Overseas." Julian's knuckles were white around the phone. He forced the words out like they were scraping his throat. "Overseas." A technical warning report was published. Evelyn frowned. "What report?" "About Novacore's flagship energy module. Thermal runaway boundary." Julian scanned the screen rapidly. His face growing paler by the second. "They released all our internal test data from the past 2 years. Including all 4 rounds of extreme condition validation conclusions." Evelyn's mind went blank. "Impossible. Only the tech center has access to that data," signed by Damien Sinclair. Julian lifted his head. The victorious light in his eyes had shattered completely. "The report bears his signature. Dated 3 months ago." 3 months ago. Evelyn's breath caught. 3 months ago. She'd been deep in overseas MA negotiations. She'd barely been at headquarters. She attended one tech meeting. Damien stood on stage and ran through a mountain of data. She'd found it tedious. Finally said internal warnings don't equal final conclusions and walked out. She never imagined he'd started backing up data back then. Preparing this move from that moment. "What's the situation now?" Her voice was tight. 15 minutes after publication. Overseas partners sent formal inquiry letters. 3 minutes later. Asian markets opened. Novacore's stock. Julian glanced at a real-time trading app. His fingers shook. Down 9%. Evelyn's head spun. 9%? In under half an hour? She grabbed her own phone. The screen lit up with a dozen missed calls. Chairman's office. Investors. Partners. Media. She couldn't answer any of them. Her thumb flew to the trading app. Novacore's candlestick chart looked like it had been sliced with a knife. Vertical drop. No meaningful bounce. She stared at that line, feeling something squeeze her chest. The tech center. Get them to issue a clarification immediately. Julian had already dialed. But the first sentence from the other end made him freeze. Mr. Ashford. The tech center signed a company-wide non-disclosure agreement this morning. Mr. Sinclair's last act before leaving was having legal bind all core technical staff under non-compete clauses. We can't issue any technical statements. Legal says speaking would trigger a breach of contract lawsuit. What do you mean you can't issue anything? This is crisis management. Legal's exact words. The voice on the phone turned bitter. Mr. Sinclair blocked every exit. Julian hung up. All the strength seemed to drain out of him. He leaned against the VIP room wall. The champagne flute he'd been holding had fallen over somewhere. Golden liquid seeped slowly across the tabletop. Evelyn watched him and felt a surge of absurdity. 10 minutes ago. They'd been clinking glasses. 10 minutes ago. She thought everything was under control. The 900 million. She suddenly understood. She looked down at the bank notification again. He wasn't compensating me. He split off a portion of the cash he got from liquidating his shares. Liquidating? Julian straightened abruptly. Evelyn's nails dug into her palm. She pulled up the shareholder registry change log. The data on the screen made her vision go dark. He sold all his personal holdings before the shareholder meeting today. All of them? All of them. Julian's face lost the last trace of color. 86 billion. He dumped 86 billion worth of stock into the market? Evelyn didn't answer. She just stared at the 900 million figure in the transfer message. And finally understood what Damien meant by last act of decency. He knew what would happen today. He knew Novacore would crash after the warning went public. He left her 900 million. Not compensation. A lifeline. But that lifeline, Evelyn gripped her phone. Her palms were slick with cold sweat. Contact all directors. Emergency meeting. Her voice was hoarse. But she held it together. And get Damien on the line. Julian didn't move. Julian. His phone's off. Julian turned his own screen toward her. The call log showed the dreaded number unavailable message. They'd tried the landline too. His secretary said he'd already left the building. Leo Marsh went with him. Evelyn stood frozen. Her phone vibrated again. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. She hesitated 1 second. Picked up. A mess. Hartwell? Financial Daily Reporter. Regarding the Overseas Technical Warning Report. Does the company have a response? Were you aware of significant safety risks in your product and still proceeded with mass production expansion? A mess. Hartwell? Are you still there? We're in a meeting. Statement will be issued later. She hung up. Her fingertips were ice cold. Julian walked over. Lowering his voice. Now's not the time to panic. Stabilize the board first. Issue a conservative response. Frame it as normal technical discussion. Suppress the narrative. Suppress? Evelyn looked at him. Bloodshot eyes. The report lists batch numbers. Test conditions. Failure thresholds. Tell me how you suppress that. Julian had no answer. The VIP room went silent for a full 10 seconds. Through the window came muffled voices from the lobby downstairs. The departing shareholders hadn't dispersed yet. They were still talking about today's great transition. None of them knew they'd just walked out of a company about to collapse. Evelyn walked to the window and pulled the curtain fully open. Afternoon sunlight streamed in, making her squint. In the plaza below, she saw a man in a dark coat walking toward the parking lot. That silhouette was too familiar. She leaned forward involuntarily, almost pressing her face against the glass. Damien, her voice was barely a whisper. Julian didn't hear it. The silhouette didn't look back. He got into a car. The vehicle pulled slowly out of the plaza and disappeared around a street corner. He never looked back once. Evelyn stood at the window, her fingernails digging into the sill. She felt like today's shareholder meeting was a meticulously rehearsed play. She'd played the lead role, acted through to the final act, only to realize the director had never shown her the real script. A mess. Hartwell. Julian called from behind her. The directors are online. You need to chair. She took a deep breath and turned around. The champagne on the table was still releasing tiny bubbles. The celebration flowers were glaringly bright. She walked over and pushed the flowers to the corner of the table. Connect the line. The emergency board meeting unfolded like a trial. Is the overseas warning report real or not? A director's voice came through the speaker, carrying barely suppressed anger. If it's fake, we can sue Damien for malicious defamation. If it's real, he stopped. Everyone in the room knew what came after if it's real. Evelyn sat at the head of the conference table. 3 documents lay in front of her. A summary of historical test data urgently pulled from the tech center. A comparison copy of the overseas warning. And a crisis response plan she'd drafted herself. 3 documents. 3 contradictory answers. On authenticity, she tried to keep her voice steady. The data cited in the warning does originate from internal tests. But the conclusion is overinterpreted. Anomaly amplification under extreme conditions doesn't mean the product will exhibit similar behavior in actual usage. Mess. Hartwell. Be honest with us. Another director cut her off. When did you first learn about this data? Evelyn's fingers tightened under the table. 3 months ago. At the tech review. 3 months ago. The first director's voice rose. You knew 3 months ago that the product might have a major risk. And you didn't halt production? The external lab hadn't replicated the findings yet, so you let it continue? The room went quiet. Only the air conditioner hummed. Julian, seated at Evelyn's right hand, tried to mediate. Everyone. The most urgent issue isn't assigning blame. The market is reacting. We need to issue a formal response today. Even a temporary one. To contain the panic. Contain? An older director laughed coldly. That overseas report was co-published by third-party institutions. Do you know what that means? It means every overseas order enters rear review. We bet hundreds of billions on overseas expansion. Now it's all suspended. Short sellers are already moving in Hong Kong. A fund just called asking whether to suspend their position. A mess. Hartwell. You've been in office 1 day. And this is what you bring us? Blow after blow. Landing like stones thrown into water. Evelyn sat upright. Spine straight. Expression intact. But under the table, her clenched hand had turned white at the knuckles. She remembered that tech review 3 months ago. Damien standing in front of the projection screen, going over those thermal runaway curves 3 times. She'd sat in the audience, thinking about the overseas MA negotiation milestones. She'd thought he was overreacting, using a technician's conservatism to veto everything. She'd checked her phone 3 times during that meeting. Now those same data points were public, under the global spotlight. She finally understood, when Damien blocked expansion again and again. He wasn't hindering the company. He was shielding it from a blade. And she was the one who pushed the shield away. Directors. I understand your frustration. Her voice finally carried a hint of rawness. But right now, we need to solve the problem. First, legal drafts a statement immediately. Don't deny the data's authenticity, but emphasize that extreme condition testing is standard R&D procedure and doesn't reflect real-world product issues. Second, the chairman's office arranges investor outreach, targeted communication with major institutional holders. Third, overseas business lines suspend new contracts pending compliance review of existing orders. Suspend new contracts? Julian frowned. Overseas orders are our lifeline. Stopping will only fuel more panic. Would you rather wait for overseas regulators to revoke all our market access permits? Which hurts more? Julian fell silent. The board reluctantly approved her emergency plan. But when the meeting ended, none of the dozen faces on the screen looked relieved. Everyone wore the expression of someone who'd boarded a ship that was already taking on water. Evelyn was the last to leave the virtual meeting room. As soon as the door clicked shut, her shoulders sagged. Julian stood and walked over. Are you okay? Do I look okay? He didn't answer. After a moment of silence, he asked, the 900 million. Are you keeping it? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. She stared out the window. The sky had darkened. From afternoon to evening. In just a few hours, her world had flipped upside down. I don't know. If you return it to him, return it? She let out a faint laugh. Light. Self-mocking. He liquidated all his shares. Published the warning report. Do you think he's the type to reverse a decision? Julian had no comeback. Evelyn looked down at the 3 documents on the table. Her voice grew quieter. You know, the last time we really fought was the night before the divorce. He said, Evelyn. Trust me one time. Just once. Let me finish that last round of tests before deciding on the expansion pace. And I said, Damien. You want me to trust you one time. But you've already made me wait a year. She paused. Now I think about it. What was he waiting for that year? He was waiting for the data to mature. For the risk to reveal itself. For evidence that could convince everyone. And what was I waiting for? I was waiting for a chance to charge ahead without needing proof. We were never waiting for the same thing. A mess. Hartwell. The corporate secretary knocked and entered. Expression tense. Overseas business line just called. The Singapore partner requests an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. Asking if we can send someone. Tell them, they said if they don't see someone by tomorrow, they'll initiate the default loss mitigation clause. Evelyn's hand stopped midair. Several seconds of silence. Book the ticket. I'll go myself. But you've only been in office 1 day, that's exactly why I have to go. I can't let them think Novacor doesn't even have someone willing to stand up. The secretary nodded and left. Julian watched her back and said suddenly, You're acting like him. Evelyn's posture stiffened. What? Going straight to the front line without explanation. Julian leaned against the table. His tone complicated. I used to say Damien was too stubborn. But now watching you make the same choice, I can't tell anymore what's stubbornness and what's responsibility. Evelyn didn't turn around. Stop. I'm serious, I said stop. Her voice was soft, but carried a coldness that brooked no further discussion. Julian wisely shut his mouth. The conference room fell quiet again. Evelyn stood there, staring at the patch of carpet illuminated by the street lamp outside the window. She suddenly remembered a small thing from long ago. Back when the company was just starting. Cash was tight. They could barely make the office rent. One night she worked until dawn. When she came out, she found Damien sitting on the steps at the end of the hallway. An old laptop balanced on his knees. She walked over and asked what he was doing. Looking at test data, he said. Test data? At a time like this? We should be figuring out how to find money. He looked up at her and said, I'll handle the money. The testing can't wait. Back then, she didn't really understand what he meant. Now she thought she did. But he was already gone. Damien Sinclair didn't go straight home after leaving the company building. Leo drove. He glanced at Damien in the rearview mirror several times. From the moment the shareholder meeting ended until now, Damien had been leaning back in the passenger seat with his eyes closed, not saying a word. Outside, the sky gradually darkened. City lights flowed across the car windows like liquid. Mr. Sinclair. Where to? West Hill. Leo blinked. West Hill was an old industrial zone on the outskirts of the city. Novacore's very first lab had been located there. After the company moved to the CBD, the area was abandoned. Nothing left but a few gray, dusty factory buildings. Nobody's been out there in years. I know. Leo didn't ask further. He turned the wheel. The drive took nearly 50 minutes. The farther they went toward West Hill, the sparser the lights became. The roads narrowed. Eventually the car stopped in front of a 3-story gray-white building. The rusted metal sign on the facade was illegible. Only the weeds growing taller than a person remained in the corner. Damien got out and stood in front of the building for a moment. Wait in the car. He walked inside alone. The lock had been broken for years. One push and the door swung open. The hallway was thick with dust. Paint peeled from the walls in curling strips. The air smelled of old concrete and rust. He climbed the stairs to the farthest room on the second floor. Pushed open the door. Empty. Just a few stacks of discarded cardboard boxes and a crooked-legged table. This table. More than a decade ago, he and Evelyn had written Novacore's first technical proposal on this very table. Two people huddled together in a winter room with no heat, sharing a single military-style coat. Fingers stiff from cold as they typed. Evelyn cursed at him for being too rigid in his logic. He told her formulas weren't rigorous enough. Then they'd fight. Then cook instant noodles together. Neither of them had ever imagined the future would turn out like this. He stood in front of that crooked table for a long time. There was still a scratch on the surface, one Evelyn had accidentally made back then. She'd drawn a crooked little flower with a ballpoint pen, saying it would ward off bad luck. He'd never wiped it off. Kept it all these years. More than a decade later, that little flower was still there. The person who drew it was gone. Damien reached out and touched the mark. His fingertips were cool. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out. A message from the overseas contact. Market reaction to the report is more severe than expected. Two major overseas buyers have announced internal safety review procedures. Also, Novacore seems to be arranging an emergency trip to Singapore. Damien read it and replied, noted. Another message came, "What's your next move?" He thought for a moment. Typed 4 characters back, "Watch and wait." He put the phone away. Took one last look at the empty room. Then turned and walked out. Leo got out of the car when he saw him approach. "Mr. Sinclair. Want to grab something to eat? You haven't eaten anything since this morning." "No." "Then, should I drive you back to the office?" Leo paused. "Which office?" "I still have that small workspace up in the North District." "Don't I?" Leo remembered. It was a small space Damien had rented with personal funds 2 years ago. Registered under a completely independent entity. Officially a tech consulting office. In reality, just a place for himself. Evelyn had called it a waste of money back then. Asked why he'd rent it if it didn't make anything. He said he needed somewhere to store things. What he stored were edge case technology validations that Novacore couldn't pursue and nobody else wanted to touch. Now, it turned out those things were a key. The drive took another 40 minutes. They stopped in front of an unremarkable office building in the North District. The building was old. Even the elevators were outdated. Damien went up to the 5th floor. Pushed open the door. Inside was a studio of about 1,200 square feet. A few long tables. Several workstations. A bookshelf full of lab notebooks. One wall was covered by a massive technical roadmap. Marked in red pen with over a dozen directions. Beside each direction, the notes column read things like, "Verified, migratable, needs secondary confirmation." Leo stood at the doorway, looking at these things seriously for the first time. "Mr. Sinclair. You started preparing this 2 years ago?" "Not preparing." Damien took off his jacket and hung it over the back of a chair. "Walking to a workstation to boot it up. Some things I couldn't do at the company back then." "What things?" "Like this." He pointed to a direction marked with a double red line on the map. "Base material replacement plan for the energy module. I proposed it twice at Novacore. Shot down both times. Reasons: too costly. Too long a cycle. The market wouldn't accept it. But looking at it now, if the material isn't replaced, the risk was going to blow eventually." Damien hit the return key. The screen lit up. Several completed project files popped up in sequence. Each with a completion date in the file name. The earliest was from 1.5 years ago. Leo stared at those dates. An indescribable feeling rose in his chest. 1.5 years ago. Damien was still at the company. Still presenting proposals at board meetings. Getting rejected every time. But even rejected, he didn't stop. Used his own money to keep working outside. Independently validated. Completed. And archived every single rejected proposal. He hadn't been unprepared. He just hadn't brought his preparations to a fight he knew he couldn't win. "Leo." "Yes?" "Contact a few people for me tomorrow morning. I'll send you the list." "Who?" "Engineers who used to be in Novacore's tech center. Some went to other companies. Some went independent. The directions they're working on overlap with my roadmap. I need to regroup." Leo nodded. "Understood." "Then this workspace," Damien paused. "Starts operations tomorrow." He said this. Then stopped. Looked up at the wall covered in red marked lines. His gaze lingered on one direction for a long time. How much did Novacore lose today? Leo glanced at his phone. Closed down 17%. Dropped further after hours. If overseas markets continue to ferment overnight, it'll likely open lower tomorrow. Mr. Sinclair. Do you feel any reluctance at all? Damien finished the sentence for him. Leo nodded. Damien didn't answer immediately. He walked to the window and looked down at the sparse car lights below. His voice was soft. Reluctant is real. But reluctance doesn't help. Some falls have to be taken to learn the pain. I shielded her too many times before. Shielded her until she thought risk didn't exist. Now I just stopped shielding. That night, not a single person at Novacor slept. Evelyn's flight departed in the early morning hours, bound for Singapore. She leaned against the window on the plane, trying to sleep, but couldn't. Her mind replayed the afternoon's board meeting on a loop. Julian's pale face, the vertical drop on her phone screen, and Damien's back as he left the venue. She used to think Damien was a man so stubborn he suffocated you. Slow. Demanding. Always using wait a little longer to drain her enthusiasm. But today she suddenly realized, every single wait a little longer had a reason behind it, one he'd already seen but couldn't be bothered to explain. He didn't explain because he thought it wouldn't matter. That realization hurt worse than the stock price. At 4 a.m. the plane landed at Singapore Changi Airport. The person picking her up was the head of Novacor's Southeast Asia subsidiary. Last name Chen. He looked exhausted. Clearly not having slept either. Ms. Hartwell. They moved the meeting up to 7 a.m. 7? Their side said the sooner the better. Evelyn checked her watch. Less than 3 hours until 7. She took a deep breath. Go to the hotel first to change. Are the materials ready? In the car. But I should warn you, Chen lowered his voice. They brought their legal team today. Evelyn's step faltered. Bringing a legal team meant they'd already prepared the compliance paperwork for termination. This meeting wasn't a negotiation. It was a notification. Got it. The hotel room light was on. Evelyn showered and changed into her suit as fast as possible. Then sat at the desk and quickly flipped through the materials Chen had brought. The more she read, the colder she felt. Buried in the overseas partner's contract was an inconspicuous additional clause: if the supplier possesses known but undisclosed safety risks in its products, the buyer has the right to unilaterally terminate all outstanding orders without liability. She'd personally reviewed this clause during the original negotiations. Thought it was standard compliance language. Didn't pay it much attention. Now it was a sword hanging over her head. At 6:50 a.m. Evelyn stood outside the partner's building. The lobby lights of the high-rise were blindingly white. She straightened her collar and walked in. The receptionist led her to the 36th floor. The conference room door was open. 6 people sat inside. At the head of the table was a man in his 40s. Last name Lim. He was the head of APAC procurement for the partner company. Beside him sat 2 lawyers and a technical advisor. Ms. Hartwell. Thank you for coming. Lim stood and shook her hand. His expression was polite. But the politeness carried clear boundaries. Please. Sit. Evelyn sat down and placed her materials on the table. Mr. Lim. I know why you requested this meeting. Let me state our position first. Novacor places the highest priority on product safety. We maintain continuous internal technical tracking. The data cited in the overseas warning report falls under proactive early warning scope. It does not represent actual product failure records. Our products have always been compliant under current delivery standards. Ms. Hartwell. Lim interrupted her. His tone remained courteous. But his words were merciless. That warning report is not proactive. It was completed 3 months ago. That means your company knew about this risk 3 months ago and did not halt deliveries. We reviewed your internal communications. Over the past 2 years, your tech center submitted at least 3 proposals to delay expansion. All 3 were internally rejected. And Ms. Hartwell, you should know better than I who signed off on those rejections. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly beneath the table. She knew that if they'd dug up this level of detail, they'd done far deeper due diligence than she'd anticipated. Mr. Lim, I acknowledge there were differing technical opinions internally. But corporate decisions are never made on a single dimension. Risk is a single dimension. Lim pushed a document across the table. We initiated an independent internal technical assessment last night. Preliminary conclusion: if the energy module experiences thermal runaway under extreme operating conditions, the resulting damage is irreversible. As the purchasing party, we are responsible to all our downstream customers. Therefore, he paused. We have decided to suspend all undelivered orders. Products already delivered will also undergo a comprehensive inspection process. Cooperation is suspended until the inspection results are available. Evelyn stared at the document. Several seconds passed without a word. She'd imagined the worst-case scenario. But hearing the word suspend all orders still felt like something had slammed into her chest. Mr. Lim, could you give us a grace period? At least preserve the orders already in production, Ms. Hartwell. I understand your position. But this is a compliance decision, not a commercial negotiation. The room fell silent. The people across the table looked at her with calm, professional expressions. No malice in their eyes. But no concession either. Evelyn sat there and felt a profound exhaustion wash over her. From being elected chairman yesterday to flying to Singapore today, less than 24 hours had passed. In those 24 hours, she'd experienced a grand coronation, a brutal reversal, and a clear-eyed collapse. She picked up the water glass on the table and took a sip. The water was cold. It slid down her throat like swallowing ice. I understand your decision. She set the glass down. Her voice steadied. But I request that we maintain communication channels. Novacor will complete an internal technical review as soon as possible and submit a third-party verification report. At that point, we can discuss whether cooperation can resume. Lim looked at her for a few seconds, then nodded. Agreed. But time is limited. Our downstream customers are also waiting. Understood. The meeting ended quickly. Less than 40 minutes from start to finish. When Evelyn walked out of the building, the sky was fully bright. Singapore's morning sun was pleasant. Pedestrians and traffic moved as usual. She stood by the roadside, watching people who had nothing to do with her come and go, and felt a strange sense of detachment. Her phone rang. Julian. How did it go? Suspended. 2 seconds of silence on the line. All of it? All of it. I'll have legal review the contract terms immediately. See if there's any room, don't bother. I read the terms this morning. They have full legal standing. Evelyn, Julian. You know what? She looked up at the sky. Her voice was very soft. That 900 million Damien transferred to me. I finally understand what he meant now. What? He wasn't giving me an escape route. He was telling me, Evelyn, this is the weight you insisted on carrying. Carry it yourself. The person on the other end of the line said nothing. Evelyn hung up, stood on foreign soil and took a deep breath. Then she opened her contacts. Scrolled to a name saved as Damien Sinclair, old. She hadn't dialed that number in a long time. She stared at the name on the screen. Her fingertip hovered over the call button for a long time. In the end, she didn't press it. She didn't know what she would say if she called. I was wrong. So what if she was wrong? The person she'd pushed away wouldn't come back just because she said she was sorry. Help me? What right did she have to ask for help after driving him out? She put the phone away and turned back to the car. Back to the hotel. See if we can schedule a meeting with a local industry technical body this afternoon. She said to Chen. I need an independent technical assessment. A mess. Hartwell. That kind of assessment takes at least 2 weeks, then 2 weeks it takes. But the market can't wait 2 weeks. Evelyn closed her eyes and leaned back in her seat. I know. The car merged into Singapore's morning traffic. Everything outside was moving forward. Only she felt like she'd been left behind. The next 3 days. Novacore's situation worsened by the hour. News of the overseas partner suspending orders hit the financial headlines the next day. The titles were increasingly alarming. Novacore's core product implodes. Founder cashes out and exits, 100 billion market cap evaporates overnight. Who pays for technological gambling? Damien Sinclair's liquidation, a retreat prepared over 6 months when Evelyn returned from Singapore. The company building was surrounded by reporters. She entered through the underground garage and took the freight elevator up. Never showing her face. Julian handled a round of media interviews. When he came back, his shirt collar was disheveled. Everyone's asking where Damien went. He threw his suit jacket onto the sofa and collapsed into a chair. They're digging into the exact timing of his liquidation. Saying he sold all his shares 5 minutes before the shareholder meeting started. Precision-timed exit. Evelyn stood at the window with her back to him. Let them say what they want. Evelyn. We need a narrative. Even if it's just to redirect attention. Redirect to what? She turned around. Her eyes were hollow with exhaustion. Say Damien maliciously shorted his own company? Those were his shares. He can sell whenever he wants. Say the warning report is fake? The tech center signed NDAs. We can't release any counterdata. Julian opened his mouth. Closed it. Inside the company, things were collapsing too. Day 1, stock down 23%. Day 2, slight rebound. Day 3, dropped again. Total market cap had shrunk by nearly half from its peak. Several institutional shareholders began contacting the media privately, complaining about the new management's poor judgment. Board conference calls ran 3 times a day. Each session was mutual accusation. Blame shifting. Dead ends. A mess. Hartwell. The resolution to reject the expansion delay was signed by everyone. One director's voice grew colder with each meeting. But the ones driving the expansion were you and Mr. Ashford. Now that things have gone wrong, the board can't take full responsibility for you. I never asked the board to take responsibility for me. Evelyn's voice was flat. But what we need to do now is find a way to stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding? Another director laughed derisively. Overseas orders suspended. Domestic market in wait-and-see mode. Suppliers demanding payment. Tech center completely muzzled. Tell me. How exactly do you propose to stop the bleeding? Evelyn had no answer. Because she didn't know herself. On the 4th day, Julian came back from outside. His expression was worse than the previous days. Evelyn. You need to see this. He handed her his phone. The screen showed a headline from a financial, "Behind the Novacore Crisis, Julian Ashford's Rise, How a Compliance Advisor Engineered a Coup 3 Years Ago." Evelyn scrolled quickly. The article detailed every key move Julian had made since joining Novacore. Every personnel shift. Every policy adjustment. Every private conversation with board members. The article ended with a pointed line: "When the technical founder is sidelined and the compliance advisor sits at the core of power. Who is truly responsible for this company's safety?" Evelyn finished reading and looked up at Julian. "What do you think? This is aimed at me." Julian's face was dark. "Someone is leaking information." "Who?" "I don't know. But whoever dug this deep into the timeline isn't an outsider." "You're saying someone inside the company fed this to the media?" Julian didn't answer. But Evelyn understood. The people on the board were covering their own tracks. Directing the fire toward Julian meant she would carry less of the weight. They didn't care about methods. They only cared about who stood in the front row when the final reckoning came. Evelyn handed the phone back. Her voice was hoarse. "Keep a low profile for now. I'll handle external engagements this week. You alone, Julian. This isn't about which one of us shows up." She looked at him. For the first time, a deep weariness showed in her eyes. "We made these decisions together. Now we pay for them together." Julian stood there looking at her. In the end, he didn't argue. That night, Evelyn locked herself in her office. The desk was covered in stacks of documents, records of every Novacore expansion meeting from the past 2 years. She turned page after page. Saw her own signatures. Her votes. Her words at each meeting. When she reached the record of the tech review 3 months ago, her fingers stopped. Damien's speaking notes had been transcribed by the minute taker in standard format: proposal, suspend mass production expansion. Complete 3 additional rounds of extreme condition validation before proceeding with decision-making. Basis: 4th round internal testing indicates thermal runaway boundary amplification. Conditions for commercial safety certification not met. Below it was Evelyn's response: motion to disagree with suspension. Recommend technical team continue observation while advancing parallel overseas validation. 4 words: continue observation. Now they read like a punchline. She stared at those 4 words for a long time. Then she buried her face in her arms and slumped over the desk. The office was silent. Only the occasional sound of wind squeezing through the window cracks. She suddenly remembered the last thing Damien said to her the year they divorced. "Evelyn, when you make decisions from now on, remember to think 1 step further." At the time, she thought he was meddling. They were already divorced. Why was he still playing mentor? Now she suddenly understood. That wasn't instruction. It was worry. He was worried she'd move too fast and leave important things behind. And she had. Left behind technical. Left behind safety. Left behind him. She didn't sleep that night. At 3 a.m., she lifted her head from the desk. Her phone screen lit up with an email notification. She rubbed her eyes and opened it. The sender field showed 3 words: Damien Sinclair. Her heartbeat stopped for half a beat. The email body contained only 1 sentence: "I've already spoken to Mr. Lim in Singapore. He'll give you a 2-week review period." Below it was a contact number for a technical advisor. Evelyn stared at those words. Her fingers tightened around the edge of her phone. He knew. He knew she'd gone to Singapore. Knew she'd been shut out. Knew what she needed most right now. And he said nothing. Just paved the road for her. She stared at the email. Tears fell without warning. hitting the phone screen, blurring the name Damien Sinclair into a watery smear. She wanted to reply something. Typed thank you. Deleted it. Typed a whole paragraph. Deleted it. In the end, she only sent one line, "Where are you?" The message went out. Vanished into silence. He didn't reply. The next 2 weeks were the longest stretch of Evelyn Hartwell's career. The technical advisor Damien's email had referred to was a German materials scientist named Dr. Schmidt. When Evelyn contacted him, his attitude was unexpectedly cooperative. No talk of fees. No conditions. Just a brief explanation: "Mr. Sinclair has already communicated with me. I will complete the independent review." Dr. Schmidt's team spent 10 full days rerunning all of Novacore's energy module test data. The conclusion was better than Evelyn had feared. The thermal runaway boundary did exist. But the triggering conditions were extreme. In ordinary commercial usage scenarios, the probability was very low. Dr. Schmidt added a note at the bottom of the report: "Risk is real, but not an imminent fatal defect." After supplementary material optimization, the product can continue commercial use. This report bought Evelyn a little breathing room. She sent the review conclusion to Mr. Lim in Singapore. After reviewing it, he agreed to adjust the full suspension to conditional progression. Delivered products could continue normal use. Undelivered orders moved to a review process, pending approval of the material optimization plan. Not a complete escape, but it shifted the trajectory from collapse to repair. Before she could exhale, the next thing hit. On the 12th day, Julian appeared at her office door. His tie was crooked. His face was worse than she'd ever seen it. "Evelyn, I need to talk to you." "Go ahead." He walked in, closed the door, and stood in front of her desk for several seconds in silence. "I'm submitting my resignation." The pen in Evelyn's hand stopped moving. "Why?" Julian let out a bitter laugh. "The board approached me twice this week. They want someone to take responsibility for the technical decision errors. I'm not a founder. Not a shareholder representative. I'm later stage management. This seat was always meant to be the buffer." Evelyn looked at him, her voice low. "They want you to take the fall?" "It's not really a fall." Julian leaned back in his chair. The usual sharpness and composure were gone from his voice, replaced by a self-deprecating frankness. "I helped you push the expansion. Now that it's blown up, I stand in front. That's fair. If you leave, all the pressure falls on me. You can handle it." "How do you know?" Julian looked up at her. "Because you're Evelyn Hartwell." She froze. That phrasing was painfully familiar. Damien used to say the same thing to her, in that same tone. "Because you're Evelyn Hartwell." As if the name itself was explanation enough. But she had never been as strong as they thought. She was just good at gritting her teeth. "I don't want you to leave," she said. "I don't want to leave either." Julian stood up. "But Novacore needs a scapegoat. If I'm the one playing that role, at least it protects your position. If you fall, there's really no one left to hold the company up." Evelyn was silent for a long time. Finally, she nodded. Julian's resignation was formally submitted on the 14th day. When the public announcement went out, Novacore's stock price actually bounced 4%. The market interpreted it as a management correction signal. Evelyn stared at the news and felt her throat tighten. That night, she called Julian. "Where are you?" "Packing." I'm sorry. Silence on the line. Then a very soft laugh. You know, Julian said. Half the reason I helped you push Damien out was because I genuinely thought he wasn't right for the company. But the other half, he paused, was that I wanted that seat for myself. Evelyn said nothing. Now it turns out Damien wasn't right for Novacor. Neither am I. His self-mockery deepened. Maybe the person who was right for Novacor was the one we teamed up to push out 3 months ago. The line went dead. Evelyn sat alone in her living room, staring at the dark city outside the window. Her phone screen lit up again. That number she knew by heart. 2 weeks are up. I saw Dr. Schmidt's report. What's your next move? She stared at the words. Her heartbeat started racing again. This time, she didn't hesitate long. She picked up the phone and dialed. 3 rings. He picked up. Damien. Yeah. His voice was calm. Distant. But unmistakably his. Evelyn gripped the phone. Opened her mouth several times. Finally managed one sentence. Can you come back? Silence on the line for a few seconds. Come back to what? Novacor. Novacor doesn't need me anymore. His voice was still calm. No anger. No coldness. Just stating a fact. You were right. A company can't run on founder instinct. Follow the capital and system rules you chose. Those rules were your choice. The words pinned her in place. Evelyn closed her eyes. Her lips trembled. She wanted to say I was wrong. But she knew that in a game measured in billions and corporate survival, I was wrong was as light as a scrap of paper. Damien. Her voice was low. I haven't touched the 900 million. He didn't answer immediately. Keep it, he said after a moment. I never intended to take it back when I gave it to you. If you can't hold on in the future, at least you'll have a way out. But I don't just want to hold on. Her voice cracked. I want to rebuild Novacor. Properly this time. Your way. Another long silence. So long she thought he'd hung up. Then she heard him exhale. Very softly. Evelyn. You finally learned to slow down. She bit her lip. Tears rolled silently down her face. But it's too late. Isn't it? No. His voice came through the line. Across the distance and static. Like a road stretching far ahead. First stabilize Novacor. Fill in what needs fixing. When you're on solid ground, I'll have something new to discuss with you. Something new? You'll know when the time comes. The line went dead. Evelyn sat in the dark living room, holding her phone. Outside, the city lights still blazed. For the first time, she felt that among those lights, there was something faint but real beginning to glow again. The next 6 months were a long repair period for Novacor. Evelyn cut 3 blindly expanded overseas lines. Retreated back to the core technology domain. Pulled out the material replacement plan that had been shelved. Had the tech center reevaluate it. And gritted her teeth to invest half a year's budget into it. At board meetings, she no longer said the phrase market window. Before every proposal, she read through 3 rounds of data herself first. The directors noticed she'd changed. Some said she'd finally become pragmatic. Others said Damien's departure had scared her straight. Only she knew the truth. She hadn't changed. She'd just finally learned to do what Damien had been doing all along, plant her feet firmly before taking the next step. And on Damien's side, he hadn't stopped either. The small workspace in the North District expanded from one person to a team of over a dozen in 6 months. Leo contacted everyone on the list. One by one. Most of them agreed almost immediately when they heard Damien was leading it. These were engineers who'd left Novacore's tech center. Squeezed out by the pace of capital. Marginalized by the mantra of efficiency first. Eventually they left on their own. In their hands were the very directions Damien had marked in red on his roadmap. Material replacement plans. New thermal management structures. Intelligent regulation systems for extreme conditions. Everyone had been validated. Everyone addressed a pain point in Novacore's existing products. At the workspace's first closed-door demo, Leo stood in front of the projection screen. As the data scrolled across the display, he couldn't help murmuring, "Mr. Sinclair. If we'd had this set of technology back at Novacore, we could have pushed it. But not this fast." Damien sat in a corner chair. Fingers interlaced on his knee. Working outside. Nobody pushes you to deliver. You get every problem right before you take it out. So now that we take it out, who's the target? Damien didn't answer. He just looked at the new thermal management system architecture on the screen. Blue-white data light reflected in his eyes. 6 months later. On an ordinary afternoon, Evelyn received a formal email. Sender, Damien Sinclair. Subject, preliminary expression of interest in technical collaboration. She opened it and saw 3 words she'd been waiting half a year to read: "We can talk." That afternoon, Evelyn had her driver take her to the old office building in the North District. She stood in front of the elevator, staring at the floor buttons for several seconds before pressing 5. The doorbell rang twice. The door opened. Leo stood inside. When he saw her, he blinked in visible surprise. Then stepped aside. "A mess. Hartwell. Mr. Sinclair is waiting for you inside." She walked in. The workspace was cleaner than she'd imagined. A few long tables. Several monitors. A wall covered in technical roadmaps. The setting sun slanted through the window, coating the densely marked red lines in a warm glow. Damien sat by the window. When he saw her enter, he stood up. He wore a thin gray sweater. More casual than he'd ever dressed at Novacore. His hair was shorter. His face hadn't changed much. But his eyes seemed quieter than they had 6 months ago. "You're here." 2 words. No greeting. No preamble. Evelyn stood at the door. Softly replied, "Mm." They looked at each other across a few steps of distance. Like crossing 6 months of silence. Like crossing the winter night more than a decade ago. When they sat opposite each other at that crooked table. Typing. "Sit." Damien pulled out the chair across from him. She walked over and sat down. Placed the documents she'd brought on the table. "This is Novacore Tech Center's latest material evaluation report. Dar. Schmidt's team has the review conclusion. Fundamentally, our direction aligns with yours." Damien picked up the report and flipped through it quickly. Same old habit, one scan to find the key points. Thermal management. Are you developing in-house or outsourcing? In-house would take too long. I prefer collaboration. If we collaborate. What precision standard? Your standard. Damien's fingers paused on the page. He looked up at her. Evelyn met his gaze. Didn't flinch. "I went through every technical suggestion you ever made over the past 6 months," she said. "You said the material needed to be replaced. Thermal management needed restructuring. Extreme condition testing couldn't be skipped. I used to think you were too slow. Now I know you weren't slow. You were steady. Damien set down the report. Leaned back in his chair. So you're here to buy a technology license? Not just that. Evelyn looked him in the eye. I'm asking you to come back. Damien didn't speak. Not as Novacore's CEO. She added. As a technical partner. Embed the new architecture. You lead the technology direction. I handle the market and management. Each of us does what we're best at. She finished speaking and found it almost ridiculous herself. Less than a year ago, she'd stood on that stage and told everyone a company couldn't rely solely on technical ideals. Now here she was, inviting that technical ideal to come back and take the lead. Damien's fingers tapped lightly on the edge of the table. Evelyn. Yes. Have you thought this through? Yes. No regrets? No regrets. He looked at her for a long time. So long that Evelyn thought he would refuse. Then the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. All right. 2 words. The setting sun streamed through the window, pulling their shadows long and slanting across the wall covered in technical roadmaps. Outside, in the North District, the streetlights began flickering on one by one, like the entire city slowly reopening its eyes. Far in the distance, Novacore's headquarters still stood against the CBD skyline. Its lights were still on, but the glow inside those lights no longer carried only the noise of capital. Something more solid was growing slowly from the foundation upward. Damien turned back to his workstation and reopened the engineering file for the new thermal management system. Evelyn stood behind him, watching the dense data stream scroll across the screen. She felt, suddenly, as if everything had returned to the starting point. Except this time, the two of them were finally facing the same direction. Well, that wraps up today's story. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment.